The whole thing's nuts. The whole thing stinks of either incompetence or a design, or we're in the Matrix. Here, watch what her gun. Look. She gets her gun out. She tried to put it in there. She couldn't do it. And she's thinking about putting it back in there. She finally gets it in there. Like the whole thing. It's like, look at her fumbling around. The whole thing is crazy. They're erratic movements. No one knows exactly what to do. It seems fake. You want Secret Service cool, calm, collected, high ready with the gun, scanning the area, looking left and right.
Yep.
You want them like swift, decisive movements. Jamie, stop ruining our dreams.
I just want to add
You son of a bitch.
That was not seemingly real. It just came from a Reddit post that people screenshotted. There was no pictures, no nothing else.
Oh, well, touche, young troll.
Yeah,
touche.
It happens a lot.
You got your story mentioned on the podcast.
The attempted hit on Donald Trump is still dominating the news cycle, and podcast listeners have been waiting to hear all their favorite podcasters give their hot takes on what happened and explain who they think is responsible. Unfortunately, most of them have been slow to jump on and talk about it. We saw how Tom and Bert were stuck behind their banked episode schedule in my previous video, and now Flagrant just dropped their free episode for the week, which was also a banked episode. Their guests were the hosts of one of the biggest podcasts from the UK called Shits and Gigs, and our boy Schultzy was in fine form.
Oh, that's a good ass point. Yo, here's a question.
Yeah.
Are there black people in the UK that are just black people?
And some of their listeners weren't happy because they were obviously waiting to hear Andy and the Toy Story boys' dogshit take on the Trump shooting. But thankfully, Brandon and Callan over on the Fighter and the Kid podcast filled the void with their insightful stories and analysis of what happened.
Do you know how I found out Trump got shot?
How?
From my 4-year-old, because when Tiger's playing a game, I leave my phone in the dugout, or I'm not on my phone. I don't see anything. Because I get to Tigers games like an hour and a half before, because I warm them up, I drop them off earlier, right? And then the game starts probably an hour and a half later. So then the rest of the family comes. Bossy comes running up. Bossy, 4, comes running up. So he comes running up, he's all, Daddy, Trunk got shot. Trunk is dead. I'm like, I remember, I have no idea what's going on. I go, what? He goes, Trunk is dead. I'm like, who the hell is Trunk? My wife's like, what, you don't see the news? You don't see anything? I'm like, no, I haven't. She's like, oh, they shot Trump. I was like, what?
I swear I've heard that story before. But hey, can I just ask you guys a question? I've noticed this a few times now, and I saw some of you comment on my previous video. Why does Brenda always talk about his kids' baseball? Is there something I missed there? I swear he brings it up at every opportunity for absolutely no reason at all. It's very strange. Anyway, Rogan also dropped his first episode for the week, and as you can imagine, everyone was waiting to see what he had to say after one of the most historical moments in American political history. Except guess who he had on? Yep, another comedian.
That was a guy that once people knew what they would go to see him, and he would murder.
Yeah.
All non sequiturs.
So this episode wasn't from the vault. It was actually recorded this week on Tuesday, July 16th. So it left a lot of people scratching their heads as to why he didn't get a last-minute guest on, like Alex Jones, for example. Tim Dillon jumped the gun on everybody and had Alex on his podcast at the beginning of this week, which I covered in my previous video. So Tim definitely won podcasting this week, but I'll talk more about Rogan's friendship with Alex Jones in a minute, because Joe and his guest Chad Daniels did eventually get to the Trump shooting. It was at the beginning of the 3rd hour. A bunch of people in the comments were posting the timestamp when they started talking about it, because it was obvious that was what most people were there for. And so when they finally got into it, Rogan did not disappoint. He'd clearly been keeping up to date on everything that had gone down.
How about that president? How about that Trump fella? How crazy is this? If there's ever been a real indication that we're in a simulation, it's like this season of USA is the craziest season that's ever existed. There's so many twists and turns, so many plots, so many villains, so many incompetent, bumbling fools. This is writing. Someone wrote this. It seems like a script.
When a president that is giving a speech gets shot in the ear and then stands up and goes full John Bender at the end of Breakfast Club.
Bro, he pumps his fist in the air.
That was a crazy
and
shit.
says, fight, fight, fight. And when the fucking guy who's the photographer is a wizard. That guy who got that photograph, find out his name, because this guy's award-winning
With the
photographer.
flag above it?
Yeah, it's one of the most iconic photos of all time.
He had a GoPro on it while he was doing it. So you
Wow.
can watch him move in position of take it.
Wow, that's nuts, man. That's nuts. So you could see as the bullets start flying, this fucking dude doesn't even duck. He's still got his camera out. He's right behind Trump, and he's just got his camera out. That is so gangster. He's running around. There could be bullets flying his way.
I would think you're holding up something black in your hand that's pointed at the president.
Crazy.
You fucking should get shot.
The Trump story is right out of a movie, and I'm hoping it's not a Stephen King movie.
Yeah, some of the photos that came out in the aftermath of the shooting were pretty crazy, and when you saw how even the Secret Service snipers flinched and hesitated when the first shots rang out, it really does put into context how quick that photographer was to kick into gear and start snapping photos, especially being that close to Donald Trump and all the commotion. There could have easily been more stray bullets to come or a second shooter hiding in the crowd or whatever. But the thing that has most people confused and calling foul play was how some of the Secret Service agents reacted in the heat of the moment.
Yeah,
Which is a chip shot.
There's so many things where you just go, what the fuck?
What the dude?
Yeah.
All of it. And there's so much of it that seems fake, like the female Secret Service agent that can't holster her weapon. Have you seen this? She's like moving around all erratically, and she tries to holster her weapon. She can't get it in there, and she can't figure out how to put it in there. And she stops for a minute, and she just tries back to do it again. And it looks so fake.
Is she an actress?
No, it looks like an actress. Okay, here, watch what her gun. Look. She gets her gun out. She tried to put it in there. She couldn't do it. And she's thinking about putting it back in there. She finally gets it in there. Like the whole thing. It's like, look at her fumbling around. The whole thing is crazy. They're erratic movements. No one knows exactly what to do. It seems fake. You're panicking. You don't know what the fuck is going on. You really shouldn't be here. Go. You're like, where do I put my gun? Like it does. You want Secret Service cool, calm, collected, high ready with the gun, scanning the area, looking left and right.
Yep.
You want them like swift, decisive movements. You don't want to see any of this fucking squirrely trying to put the gun back in. It seems fake.
Yeah, it really is stranger than fiction in a way. Rogan's known for having a pretty creative imagination, but I think most people would agree that there are so many pieces to this puzzle that don't make sense. It almost seems crazy to believe that there wasn't any foul play involved. But compared to Alex Jones on the Tim Dillon show, Rogan's takes seem pretty tame.
The deep state has truck bombs loaded in Florida. They have truck bombs, in my opinion, loaded in Wisconsin. The next move is roll a truck full of plastic explosives into the event. They're also going to try to poison him. They got people inside his organization. So poisoning, truck bombs, shootings is all in the works. Also, they've been pre-programming cyber attacks by the Russians, claiming they're working with Trump supporters. The FBI already put out reports last year saying the Russians working with Trump supporters are going to cut the U.S. power off. But it gets worse. They will also, and this is totally,
I love how you go, you go truck bombs, power outages, and then you go, and it gets worse. Like, it's crazy to think about getting it. And I understand what you're saying. It's so wild to think about this. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I want to be 1,000,000,000% clear.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this for sensational reasons.
No, for sure.
I love how he takes a swig of vodka and then says he's not making any of these claims for sensational reasons. Even Tim Dillon had to look down at his hands for a moment to stop himself from smiling. Seriously, mark my words, that episode of The Tim Dillon Show will end up being one of the best podcasts of the year. But like I said, I already went through the best bits in my previous video. I think for Rogan, though, he seems to be a little bit more level-headed about the shooting, which would have made for an interesting podcast with Alex. In almost every episode of JRE since he's been back on YouTube, people have been complaining in the comment section that he dropped Alex, and other people are always asking when he's going to have him back on. Incidentally, the last time Alex was on JRE was with Tim Dillon on episode 1555, way back in October of 2020. Rogan said a few times that he didn't want to have him back on until the lawsuit with the Sandy Hook families was finalized, but even though that case was settled back in November of 2022, he still hasn't made an appearance on Rogan's podcast. This is what Joe said about Alex a few months before the end of the Sandy Hook case was finalized.
Do you really bear the responsibility of the course of our country based on a conversation?
I think you can revitalize and rehabilitate someone's image in a way that is pretty shocking. Look at the way people look at Alex Jones now, because Alex Jones has been on my podcast a few times.
Yeah, how do they, which direction?
The people that have watched those podcasts think he's hilarious. And they think that he definitely fucked up with that whole Sandy Hook thing. But he's right more than he's wrong. And he's not an evil guy. He's just a guy who's had some psychotic breaks in his life. He's had some genuine mental health issues that he's addressed. He's had some serious bouts of alcoholism, some serious bouts of, substance abuse, and they've contributed to some very poor thinking. But if you know the guy, if you get to know him like I have, I've known him for more than 20 years. And if you know him on podcasts, you realize like he is genuinely trying to unearth some things that are genuinely disturbing for most people.
Yeah, I think it's weird that Rogan thinks people can rehabilitate their reputation, yet even 2 years after that, he hasn't had him back on his podcast. I mean, there's nothing new that has come out about Alex since then. It's not like there's some new revelation or accusation floating around that hasn't been addressed. So personally, I think he should have him back on, not necessarily because I agree with anything Alex says, but more just for the entertainment value. I will say though, it seems like Alex is in another downward spiral after he lost the lawsuit and owes $1.4 billion in damages to those families and the police officer. I don't know what's going on with his financial affairs or how he's planning to get around it, but judging from his Tim Dillon appearance, it looks like he's falling back into his old ways with the heavy drinking. Having said that, it definitely felt like this week would have been the best time to have him back on the podcast with Rogan.
He turns his head at the last second and the bullet grazes his ears. If he didn't, it hits the back of his head and he's dead. And then we fall into chaos and who knows what the fuck happens.
Big chaos.
And then people think that the Biden administration had Trump killed. And then there's these questions like, how the fuck does this 20-year-old kid climb on that roof 150 yards away and no one sees him?
Well, that one guy was pointing at him the whole time.
Yes.
He's like pointing to he's like, he's right there.
The whole thing's nuts. The whole thing stinks of either incompetence or a design or we're in the Matrix. This is a fucking fake movie. It seems like almost to watch this, the most bombastic and manly of presidents, these two female bumbling Secret Service agents, they knew this guy was on the roof. To hear that guy had pointed his rifle before that at a cop. So the cop engaged him. He pointed the rifle and the cop ran away. The guy climbed the roof with a ladder. You can see the ladder. The whole thing is bananas.
Yeah,
he's 20 years old, and then you find out he was in a BlackRock commercial. You're like, is this the Black Mirror? And then Trump goes golfing with a bandage on his ear the next day.
Yeah, and then the putt when he made the putt.
Jesus,
did you hear his quote?
No.
He said, "That's the difference between me and the shooter. I don't miss."
This isn't a real person.
And then now you have people flooding from the left, being like, "All right,
yeah."
That's a good quote. I'll do this.
I remember hearing that story a couple of days ago and just assuming it was true because it sounded exactly like the kind of thing Trump would say, sinking a 20-footer and then facing the camera to say, the difference between him and the shooter is he doesn't miss. That is peak Trump. Except fucking Jamie ruined it for everyone.
Yeah, I read that golf story too. This is not the first time. There's a lot of golf accounts that put out fake shit.
Oh.
And that...
Jamie, stop ruining our dreams.
I just want to...
You son of a bitch.
That was not seemingly real. It just came from a Reddit post that people screenshotted. There was no pictures, no nothing else.
Oh, well, touche, young troll. Touche.
It happens a lot.
You got your fucking story mentioned on the podcast.
Yeah. That's me.
You sons of bitches.
You can get me very easily.
I did read that too. The whole thing's so wild.
But one of the other things that has been lingering over Joe's shiny head for the past few years is why he refuses to have Trump on his podcast. He discussed it on that same episode with Lex Friedman 2 years ago.
The Trump era is also going to be one of the weirder times when people look back historically about the division in this country. He's such a polarizing figure that so many people felt like they could abandon their own ethics and morals and principles just to attack him and anybody who supports him because he is an existential threat to democracy itself. He's going to run again.
You
and
think
it's
he
gonna
wins?
get weird. Well, he's running against a dead man. You know, I mean, Biden shakes hands with people that aren't even there when he gets off stage.
Yeah.
I think he's seeing ghosts.
Yeah.
You see him on Jimmy Kimmel the other day?
No.
Well, he was just rambling. I mean, if he was anyone else, if he was a Republican, if that was Donald Trump doing that, every fucking talk show would be screaming for him to be off the air. And by the way, I'm not a Trump supporter in any way, shape, or form. I've had the opportunity to have him on my show more than once. I've said no every time. I don't want to help him. I'm not interested in helping him.
The night is still young. We'll see.
If I have him on, the night is still young?
Yeah.
You think I'll have him on?
I think you'll have him on.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do you think that? Because you'll have Putin on?
So I think it's interesting when he says he doesn't want to help Trump in any way, and that's why he won't have him on the show. I remember when Patrick Bet-David was on JRE last time, he tried to egg Rogan into having Trump on, and Rogan said the same thing about not wanting to help him, and PBD said that he would be inadvertently helping Biden out by not having Trump on. Joe's made it clear, though, that he simply doesn't want to give either major party a voice on his platform.
I don't want to help anybody in this race. I certainly don't want to help him, and I certainly don't want to help Biden. And
did the Biden people approach you?
No. I think maybe early on, I don't remember, before I got real controversial.
So here's the thing. It seems like the consensus is that after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, he's basically won the election already. It's a pretty rare thing for a president to be shot at, and considering it hasn't happened in the United States since Reagan was shot at over 40 years ago, now that Trump is okay and the bullet only grazed his ear, he has massive bragging rights over Joe Biden, who can barely string a sentence together at this point. That's why I think Rogan should have him on the podcast before the election. I get that he doesn't want to get directly involved with the candidates, but given that Biden hasn't stepped down yet and the days are running out for the Democrats to replace him, it's not going to make a difference if he has him on or not. The only issue I have is that it probably will end up being a wet paper bag of a podcast, just like when Rogan had The Rock on the show last year. The only reason Trump would go on JRE would be to get Joe's approval, so he probably wouldn't want to have a fiery conversation and debate with Joe. And like I said, whenever Rogan has had a big figure on his podcast, he ends up just blowing smoke up their ass the whole time.
What happened with the Trump? What's the backstory there? And did you consider having him on? Did you weigh it? Did you think about it? Not really.
They kept coming back they wanted me to do it at the White House, and I was like,
whoa.
I can't imagine.
Can you imagine that? Oh my God.
The Joe Rogan
Did you
signature
tell him
signature
that,
behind the Oval Office.
If he had been willing to come here, I don't know if you were in LA at that point.
I was in LA.
Would you have considered it more if it came?
Maybe I would have thought about it in LA, to do a real 3-hour thing. But either way, the problem is, it's a real problem in that I don't want anybody to be uncomfortable, and I don't think it's my role. If I'm talking to someone like him, there's some uncomfortable things that have to be addressed.
I've interviewed Trump. I know exactly what we're talking about. And he actually hates to be pushed. So you'll have to be like, Mr. President. And he's like, he gets pissed whenever you'll do it.
But that's why you got to do 3 hours, too.
Right. That's true.
You got to cook them.
Right. But his staff will make sure that they, right?
Exactly.
I remember.
Not only that, they'd want to edit it.
Oh, of course. 15 minutes in, underneath the Resolute desk, his staff person is hitting me in the leg trying to get me to rap it. And I was like, dude, I'm not fucking rapping this thing. I was like, I'm rapping whenever Trump is going to rap it.
Staff members hitting your leg?
Bill Shine, the former head of Fox News, was sitting there smacking my leg trying to get me to rap at 15 minutes.
Why? Because you were asking uncomfortable questions?
Asking hard questions, right? Yeah.
Wow.
So I was like, that was...
Yeah, I don't know if I believe Rogan there. I think he'd be too scared to rock the boat and ask him questions, even if Trump did come on his podcast. But still, I don't think there's anything to lose at this point. Imagine if Rogan got Trump to have his first drink ever in the studio with him, just like he got Elon to smoke a joint with him years ago. That would be wild, right? Then Jamie could get the smelling salts out and pump the Blade music. Seriously though, imagine Donald Trump smashing some smelling salts and dancing around the studio after a few whiskeys. See, that's the type of shit we want to see in 2024. Not more comedians sniffing Joe's farts and kissing the ring. Anyway, maybe he's got something in the works, but that's it from me today. Remember to check out the link in the description to my Patreon if you want to see some of my uncensored content. I've got so much exclusive stuff coming your way in the next few weeks, so definitely check that out if you're interested. Otherwise, if you're not a regular of this channel yet, hit the subscribe button and don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you ended up liking this video. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah, I don't know what the I just said. That's the problem. We're too dumb. We're too uneducated to really understand what the they're saying, but like everything you touch is nothing. There's nothing there. It's mostly nothing. And yet it's oak tables.